It's a good thing I just took a look at the party and noticed that
How may
you're
I help?
using your sword. That was from when you were charmed. The last thing I want you to do is charge into melee combat after you use some spells. You wouldn't last very long. Such is the case of being a wizard. Hey folks, it's Kikoskia here, and welcome back to Let's Play Pillars of Eternity, and when last we left off we continue to explore the 8th floor of Od Nua, and I think we're starting to reach our limit on what we can reasonably do there. I do think that we can deal with the 8th floor, but once we check out the 9th I imagine we will face an insurmountable obstacle and have to come back later. But before we go back down to the depths, this time with a +2 mechanics bonus from the Artificer's Hall, there's something I'd like to check out. The Cyclopedia, specifically the Bestiary. As we've been facing creatures, we've been learning things about them. And this is where you can check a creature's stats, their resistances, their damage reduction, and all kinds of other things. But it's also where you can just read about them. So, let's do some reading, shall we? Learn more about the opponents we will continue to face in this world. Starting with animates. Animates were initially created to serve as guardians for royal tombs. Their earliest creators bound the souls of their strongest warriors and servants to intricate sculptures, made of various materials in accordance to the rank of the soul captured within. As the knowledge of a technique for this process became more widespread, powerful animancers started creating their own animates to serve as personal guardians, using whatever weapons and materials lay at hand. Animates can only be created through the use of loyal souls that hold a powerful dedication to protecting their charges. While the ritual to create them can still be performed upon unwilling subjects, a lack of resolve in a participant's soul can result in abominations which immediately attempt to destroy themselves in a violent manner, often inflicting collateral damage in the process. Even successful creations remain vulnerable to the onset of doubt, and most animate creators take great care not to allow such doubts to manifest. I can only imagine how terrible it would be when that happens to a soul infused into non-living material. We have the stats here. We defeated only one of these, so we know basically nothing aside from the DR. As for animates, we defeated 2, and again we don't know much. Then, there are bears. The Deerwood has a healthy bear population, though most avoid the civilized areas and roads used by kith. Nobles sometimes hunt bears for sport, but most colonists, old-timers and Glenfathans simply avoid them. The forests of the Eastern Reach contain game that puts up far less of a fight than an angry bear. Now, we know a bit more about bears. We know their attributes, and we also know their exact defences and DR. Good to know. Then, there are beetles. Beetles are not quite man-size, but they strike a sufficiently intimidating form to frighten off most travellers. The alarmingly large insects never fail to impress and terrify visitors, and reinforce the image of the Deerwood as a barely civilized backwater. The expansive wilderness in and around Deerwood and Air Glanfath give beetles plenty of room to multiply. The most successful species of large beetle have evolved to not only camouflage themselves in the surrounding environment, but also to grow carapaces made out of common and hardy materials, such as wood, stone, and ardra. Glanfathan tribes have been known to fashion crude shields and even weapons out of the limbs and shells of these beetles. Despite all appearances to the contrary, there is an underlying complexity to the common beetle. When they choose a material with which to develop their shell, they do so with a level of intention that borders on artistry. Wood beetles will often burrow intricate holes in their carapaces. By blowing air through these makeshift pipes, they play an eerie music to attract mates. Stone beetles fashion rudimentary tusks and horns to help them to defend themselves and to attack prey. The intricacies of Ardra beetles are as of yet not well understood, save that they are notoriously difficult to kill. Oh yeah, Ardra beetles have incredibly high defences, and a lot of shock DR, not surprising considering the fact that they can blast lightning. Stone beetles are not as tough generally, but you can see that damage there they deal, and that they have a corrode DR. Finally, you have wood beetles, who have DR against burn and crush, as well as slash and pierce. But they are also the weakest of the three. Then, you have boars. Wild boars are considered a nuisance and danger in the areas that most colonists settle in. Aggressive and fearless, boars have killed many human and elven children, as well as fully grown orlans. Packs of boars can be a threat to any traveller or explorer. They are notoriously difficult to put down, but their tusks are valued by traders and enchanters. We have slain quite a few of them, and you can see here they have no special resistances. And young boars are weaker still. Then we have the Delemgan. We must have already faced one of... Oh yeah, we faced two of those. The Delemgan are forest spirits of Irglanfath that are bound into ancient, often petrified trees or Ardra monuments. They appear to have mostly elven-shaped bodies, but their skin is made of wood and their hair is long and plant-like. Dragons appear to have skin made of Ardra. Delemgan glow slightly and often have tiny motes of light around them. They do not wear clothes, but lack sexual organs, as they only have the overall shape of humanoids. Delemgan are entirely magical beings and do not use physical weapons to attack. Their attractiveness is used in tandem with their magic, trying to stop attackers or lure them to their deaths. These creatures draw their essence from their environments. While they have physical bodies and can be killed if those bodies are destroyed, their survival also depends on the health of their environment. They feel no natural animosity towards other beings, but they will defend their territories fiercely. Thus, Delemgan and a dragon, Ardraborn, may individually be more or less hostile depending on the well-being of their locale and on whether other explorers or adventurers have, in the past, proved dangerous or benign. They are a natural roadblock to large-scale development. While rural tribes in Irglanfath often live peacefully alongside them, expanding or developing cities or towns may find themselves beset by hostile Delemgan. Some Kith too oppose the destruction of Delemgan habitats. City dwellers generally support the notion, believing that their souls will simply reincarnate in other forests or back into Kith. Don't think that's the case. Delemgan are traditionally friendly towards rangers and druids. Their spiritual link with trees has led to greater understanding of the link between rangers and their animal companions, though a definitive connection has yet to be made. A lot of information there. And you can see there, Crush 5, Pierce 5, DR. So, we now have the Drake, of which we have fought 1 Drake and 12 worms. Drake represent the middle stage of a dragon's life cycle. They have developed from worms, but have not reached, and may never reach, the dragon stage. Drakes will aggressively defend their territory and seek to expand it as much as possible. Drakes are actively hostile against other drakes, who represent competition for scarce resources. Their coloration reflects the territory they have claimed. A drake living in a swamp, for instance, may have shades of green, brown, or black, and possess nictating membranes, a flat snout, and raised nostrils. While all drakes can breathe fire, many also develop alternate breath attacks, incorporating other elements. Now that information is the same. What about worms? Here we go. Different information for worm here. Young dragons begin their life cycle as worms, though most never develop beyond that stage. Worms are clever and sly, if not especially intelligent. To develop into a drake, and eventually a dragon, a worm must have ample space and resources. They will not develop if they live near existing drakes and dragons. They must seek out a habitat that has not already been claimed by a larger counterpart. Since the chances of further development are low, most worms will band together in covens for survival. They are bold and highly aggressive creatures, if not particularly intelligent. The intense competition for food and territory demands this. I am concerned about the time we'll inevitably have to face a dragon, but that is not right now. Earth blights. These amorphous clouds rapidly swirl with violent energy. Within the maelstrom, dozens of humanoid shapes materialize and vanish within an instant. Faces scream in silent agony, while hands desperately clutch and claw at the air around the mass. This is already sounding terrible. Bioex, spirit winds, as these storms are known, often create blights. If souls are ripped free of bodies and caught in the centre of the storm, they may become stuck together and bonded with any other elemental substance in the maelstrom. They are pure chaos and confusion. Destroying them is considered a mercy to the souls trapped within. Yep, this sounds terrible. Experimenting with blight creatures is yet another questionable activity that has earned animancers a bad reputation in many circles. Some see it as dangerous and inhumane, others as a means to an end. The creation of blights is an accusation many fearful kith level at animancers. Ooh. Then we have vampires, of which we have only faced 2. Vampires are kith that have had their lives unnaturally extended. They retain most of a normal humanoid appearance. They are merely a few missed meals away from devolving into mindless monstrosities, and they know it. As vampires maintain individual personalities and memories, this morbid knowledge may manifest itself in a number of ways. Some may become reclusive and cautious, avoiding any threats that could permanently weaken or destroy them, and others become outgoing hedonists, seeking to enjoy every pleasure the world has to offer while they can. Sooner or later, every vampire, unless killed, will inevitably succumb to decay. Because vampires require living essence in order to stay alive, and the blood of kith provides the richest and most immediate source of it, they are shunned by most civilized communities. As a result, vampires tend to live at the fringes of society, if they participate in it at all. So in this setting, you start off as effectively a vampire when you start extending your life unnaturally. But you will decay down into lesser forms. And I'm going to skip forward a bit, because I know one of these lesser forms is right here, the Dargul. Darguls have reached the first irreversible step in the decay of a nominally dead body sustained by soul energy. At this stage, they have lost some portion of their memories and mental abilities, but they retain the self-awareness to recognize their own decline. Their insatiable hunger and inevitable decay makes Darguls more reckless and aggressive than vampires, even as they are compelled to seek out secret and secluded environments so as to avoid drawing the attention and wrath of civilized communities. Some vampires dread this stage more than those that follow, for they know that they will retain enough of their faculties to fully experience their own downfall. Yeah, that would not be great. At all. And then you have ghouls. It is generally understood that ghouls retain enough cunning to make dangerous hunters and adversaries, but not enough to be concerned about their rapid deterioration. Like Darguls, they are drawn to secluded environments, though some gravitate towards cemeteries in search of readily available flesh. The meat of dead kith satisfies some of a ghoul's hunger, but it does little to sate their need for soul essence. Inhabiting a graveyard may actually hasten a ghoul's decay, as it reduces their incentive to seek out living sources of food. What did they decay into beyond this? Do I want to know? I guess I'll find out in time. Let us go to flame blights. This is the same description. This is the same description. Okay, so we could avoid all the blights. Let's go to a lurker. Lurkers are actually comprised of a colony of several different species of parasitic, carnivorous plants and fungi working together to hunt common prey. As a whole, they stand nearly 10 feet tall in a vaguely anthropomorphic body, comprised of vines, leaves, roots, and earth. The coexistence of so many separate organisms can make them hard to eradicate, and it is usually best to sever the parts that enable locomotion, or to simply light the entire colony on fire. Yeah, I imagined fire was their weakness. Now, the means by which lurkers form remains a bit of a mystery. Some speculate that they form when certain species of flesh-eating plants come together on a common host, such as the hollowed victims of dank spores, and achieve locomotion once sufficiently strong. This theory is supported by the fact that many lurkers, when cut open, contain bones and other remains riddled with roots and spores. The lurkers are notorious for hiding in plain sight. often waiting motionless amongst the trees and underbrush to ambush their prey. They appear to hold a rudimentary intelligence, and are at least sophisticated enough to store food. It is not uncommon to see several unconscious victims tangled in a lurker's vines, being saved for later feeding. Ooh. Keep that in mind. Then we have ogres. Ogres are large, thick-skinned creatures standing between 10 to 12 feet tall. They are heavily muscled and typically attired in the furs or skins of their prey. Clubs, axes and maces, or bone or wood are their preferred weapons. Ogres were intelligent, often more so, than civilized races, but their overwhelming hostility towards even their own species keeps their numbers low. Despite their natural intelligence, their volatile temperaments have historically prevented them from concentrating long enough to create anything of significant cultural value. Most live semi-nomadic, secluded lives in the wilderness, where they are less likely to encounter others. The only time they reliably come together is during the mating season, which often does almost as much to reduce their numbers as it does to replenish them. Ogres with a more peaceful streak take particular pains to avoid contact. On the rare occasions that ogres are found working together, they are almost always operating under the direction of an ogre matron. Ogre matrons are even larger than male ogres, but tend to be less aggressive towards their own kind. Where ogres have banded together, they have often represented an insurmountable threat to other kith. Nothing different here, and nothing different there. Thought I'd check those. Then we have oozes. An ooze is a mobile carnivorous mold that develops in dark, dank places that experience little to no regular traffic. Oozes feed off of ambient bacteria, fungi, and small insects as they grow. They begin to seek larger prey, including humans, once they reach the size of a dog. Like all living creatures, they have a measure of soul essence, but their lack of intelligence and a true nervous system makes them mindlessly aggressive and difficult to deter. Their viscosity and mobility enable them to perform surprisingly nimble attacks, and they are capable of spitting corrosive enzymes to break down flesh and armor. Some of the more dangerous variants of the species are disease vectors, making any confrontation with them especially perilous. I could see that, especially the swamp ooze. Rainblight will be the same. Shadow. Shadows are created when creatures with heavily fractured souls die without re-entering the cycle of rebirth. Because their souls are damaged, they drain essence from other creatures in a futile attempt to repair themselves. The more essence they steal, the more powerful and dangerous shadows become. As they devour essence, they pick up pieces of corporeal matter, giving them a visible, if indistinct, form. Luckily, shadows can only draw a small bit of spiritual energy from souls still attached to a body or bound to an object. They mainly rely on creatures like the Pigra, who can draw souls out of their physical form to help them obtain the essence they crave. Don't think we've met any of those. Shadows have been known to draw spiritual energy from people while they sleep, when their souls are not bound as strongly to their bodies. This results in horrible nightmares that leave the person in an exhausted state the next day. If an entire town suddenly begins to suffer nightmares, it is highly probable that a strong shadow has taken up residence there. Since shadows absorb spiritual energy, they appear invisible to creatures that rely on spiritual sight. This has led to experiments in binding shadows to armor or other objects to act as a cloak to obscure those who do not wish to be seen by such creatures. Oh, there's other descriptions here. Phantoms are souls that did not properly separate from the body after death. This usually happens as a result of severe trauma, particularly in the case of a violent death. Unlike lost souls, which are incapable of interacting with or being directed by normal mortals, phantoms, like shadows or Ken Gwilla, maintain a connection to the physical world. They will attack other life forms without discrimination. Phantoms can also manifest from kith who live particularly chaotic lives, including violent criminals and the insane. Anyone can become a phantom under the right circumstances, but the fear of phantoms and their association with the mentally ill can result in vulnerable populations being shunned across many communities. That's sad. Shadows, same description there, and same description there for phantoms. Okay, skeletons! Here we go. Something very traditionally fantasy. Skeletons no longer require flesh or essence, but their drive to kill has been instilled over many stages of progressive decay. As a result, they will attack anything that approaches them, but they won't attempt to consume it after it is slain. The essence that animates them is energy at its most basic level, as the skeleton has lost all measure of will, intelligence, or personality. If not killed, a skeleton may eventually grind itself into bone dust, or its essence may finally evaporate into the ether. Skeletal savants are the remains of warriors, wizards, and other adventurous types. They are similar in overall properties to other skeletons, but they are more capable in combat and often retain rudimentary skills in their adventuring lives. Death Guards, we've not encountered them yet, they sound terrifying, are an aberrant form of these skeletons, as they are skilled, powerful, and intelligent. When vampires wish to avoid gradual decay associated with their condition, they can engage in a risky, expensive, and extremely painful process that separates the tissue from bone and leaves a perfectly aware skeleton. In this case, essence does not decay in the flesh, and instead resides in the bone, a much hardier substance. Since the newly created Death Guard requires virtually nothing to survive and will not naturally decay further, it can live until it is killed. That is an interesting angle to go. A dangerous one too. And then we have Skulder. Skulder are large mammalian creatures that dwell in caves in total or near total darkness. As a result, they have poor vision and rely on their sense of hearing to navigate and find prey. The protrusions and hairs on their ears allow them to detect airflow, which is key to telling direction in an underground environment. They communicate through screeches and clicks, and use these vocalizations in a form of echolocation. They are communal creatures, and will nest and raise young together. And that's the same for both of them. Okay, we're now going to spiders. Enormous and hostile spiders come in a terrifying array of shapes, colours, and sizes throughout the Eastern Reach. Much more aggressive than their tiny kin, these giants actively seek out human and animal prey. Even the weakest of them, the spear spider, can easily kill a grown kith if the victim is unprepared. Though the spear spider lacks a poisonous bite, its piercing legs, from which its name is derived, can inflict terrible wounds, even through armour. More deadly than spear spiders are ivory spinners and widowmakers, with both species possessing horrific poisonous bites. The ivory spinner also has the ability to fire webbing at its prey, slowing it down. Widowmakers do not cast webs, but their poison is extraordinarily toxic. Seldom seen outside of the most remote locations in Irglenfath, the fabled crystal eaters are enormous and powerful, possessing magical abilities some wizards believe have been developed through the consumption of Ardra and enchanted gemstones. In addition to their ability to raise a field of deadly crystal spikes, the venom of a crystal eater will temporarily turn a victim's flesh and blood to stone. Oh! Subsequent attacks with by a crystal eater on a petrified foe are quickly fatal. Yeah, I can imagine. Spores. Sporelings are a larval form of dank spores. While more mobile and agile than their mature counterparts, these humanoid-shaped creatures are also far weaker. They spawn from the dank spores and use their heightened mobility to seek nourishment. Like dank spores, sporelings feed off of both decaying organic matter and soul essence, and they must bulk up on a sufficient amount of both before maturing into dank spores themselves. And then we can read about dank spores. These giant mushrooms stand nearly as tall as adult Omar, and are topped by a broad and colourful cap. Their enormous waist is only held upright by the dozens of roots surrounding their base. Dank spores are unique compared to other forms of fungi in their appetite for the souls of living creatures. They often grow and move in groups along the forest floor, searching for weakened or exhausted travellers who are unable to fight back. Once they find a host, they bind to it and supply it with the basic nutrients required to keep it alive while they absorb its essence. Dank spores are extremely hostile once they find a host and will attack anything that gets close to their meal with their poisonous barbed roots. Dank spores feed on the most corrupt and splintered energy of a soul first, continuing until the host is nothing but a soulless husk. This makes dank spore flesh useful to experienced apothecaries as a cleansing agent in soul purification medicines and techniques. Improperly applied, however, this treatment can lead to amnesia, and in extreme cases, soul fracturing. Ooh. Let's look at trolls. These gangly giants stand twice the average height of humans. Their bodies are covered in large fungal growths which leak foul-smelling, pus-like fluid. Ugh. Their oversized hands and feet extend to giant claws capable of rending a man in two. Dozens of slimy tendrils hang loosely from top their oversized heads, and their vast maws are filled with jagged, razor-sharp teeth. Trolls have long faces, long chins, long noses, and tangled masses of wiry fungus-infected hair on the tops of their heads. They have never been observed to use weapons, tools, or clothing. Looking at a troll, it can be difficult to tell whether they've evolved in harmony with lichen, moss, and fungi, or whether they've been overtaken by them. A troll's naturally clammy flesh provides the ideal growing environment for these plants. They provide camouflage as well as some protection from the elements, and the enzymes they produce also offer limited sustenance for trolls in lean times. Because of their symbiosis with these plants, trolls generally dwell in heavily wooded areas, although some may occasionally be seen in damp underground environments that also house an abundance of lichen and fungi. Then we have wights. Oh dear, this one's going to be grim reading. Upon the onset of Wayward's legacy, desperate families turned to animancers for help. Transferring a lost soul into a living body was out of the question, for most, since almost all such transplants resulted in an immediate awakening of a transplanted soul. The soul would retain the memories of a previous life, rather than that of the recently born child. Animancers were pressed to come up with a quick solution, though they cautioned against such haste. If an animal soul were put into a soulless child's body, the child might gain awareness, instinct, and volition. It was suggested that as animal souls possess less individual personality and memory than kid souls, the child might be able to grow into their new soul over time, and imprint over the weaker animal spirit, thus developing into healthy children. Transplants were quickly performed throughout Bestiary, and tens of thousands of afflicted children underwent the process. These children did seem to regain awareness and volition, and for a time the saved children were believed to be cured. As they aged, however, it became clear that the saved were not like other children. They held little understanding or concern for social norms and often behaved strangely. Upon reaching adolescence, these differences began to manifest in physical changes of an entirely different kind from their maturing peers. The children began to turn into wights. The first of these was an adolescent. Having come of age, she sprouted bestial fangs and acquired a feral appetite. Though her family attempted to hide her condition, she eventually butchered them in their beds and escaped into the wilderness. Other saved children soon followed, and vast numbers of broken families were forced to witness their children's transformation into ravening beasts. We defeated 20 of these so far. Yep, Wayward's legacy is awful indeed. Then we have wisps. In the cities of Bestiary, will-o'-wisps hold an almost mythological status, and feature in several old wives' tales. One of the most popular of these suggests that will-o'-wisps are the souls of lost children wandering towards their next lives. In rural areas, those who come into regular contact with will-o'-wisps regard these stories with some amusement. Wisps are known to inhabit abandoned ruins and other such forgotten places. They are thought of as curious creatures, for they will sometimes follow travellers for short distances. While typically peaceful, wisps are notoriously aggressive if provoked, and will viciously defend their territories if they perceive these to be under threat. As a result, wisps are often described as the weeds of the spirit world, small, quick to regenerate, and nearly unstoppable in large numbers. We have two more things to look at. First, wolves. Where there are deer, wolves will soon follow. This Adirian proverb, often spoken with the first phrase omitted, suggests the vulnerability that early settlers often felt in the Eastern Reach. It also speaks to a long association the Adirians, literally people of a deer, have had with the four-legged predators that are as ubiquitous in Bestiary as they are in the Adirian Empire. Wolves are legendary for their speed, as well as their ability to knock their prey prone, subsequently subjecting them to devastating attacks. And lastly, something we've encountered a lot, Zorup. Zorup are reptilian humanoids about the size of Orlands. They adorn themselves with the bones of fallen enemies, mostly Zorups from rival tribes. They also have an affinity for large feathers, which they hang and pin to their attire. Zorup skin tones can vary from light green to a rustic brown. Their elongated snouts, which make speech impossible, and overly aggressive behaviour have hindered them from communicating with the more civilized races of the world. They live in secluded tribal territories and are known for ruthlessly attacking anyone foolish enough to cross their path. Zorups revere dragons as deities, we've seen this, and bind their communities around the lairs of these powerful creatures. It is not uncommon for a small tribe to wander nomadically until it has found a drake or dragon to worship. Once a tribe dedicates itself to a dragon, it will defend it at all costs. Elaborate rituals in which the dragon consumes Zorup sacrifices are a normal practice. As a dragon grows in size and age, these sacrifices become large religious events that cost the lives of hundreds of Zorup. The power and prestige of a Zorup tribe directly correlates with the age of its dragon. The most powerful tribes have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Warriors and shamans of these tribes typically paint their bodies to resemble their draconic gods. And so, we have read the description of every type of creature and entity that we have encountered in the game so far. And when we come back, folks, we will once again head down into Od Nua to the 8th level, where hopefully our increased mechanical skill will open the way to places we could not before and make our path that much less perilous. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're not. And if you are subscribed, press that bell for those notifications. And I'll catch you next time, folks. And I'll see you then. Later.